Hi there, once again. Let the Circle Be Unbroken, Chapter 10. We will get as far as we can, and then we may have to break it into two parts, but we'll do the best we can. So, Let the Circle Be Unbroken, Chapter 10. The words, the note, were like a shotgun blast. Silence settled over the dimly lit kitchen, and a terrible fear welled within me as we stood in our nightgowns, Mama, Big Ma, Suzella, and I, staring with disbelief at the piece of paper Mama held as if we could change what it said. It was the kind of nauseous, terrifying fear which had come when Papa had been shot and the men had come to lynch TJ. Now, here it was again, coming without warning, enveloping my whole being and shattering the peace of the Sunday morning. Mama, most likely he's just outside somewheres. Most likely, Big Ma agreed, not willing to believe it either. That child, he can't be gone. Her face looking drained under the light of the lamp, Mama glanced from Big Ma to me, and could see she did not believe either of us. Cassie, do you know anything? Her voice was an urgent demand. Did Stacey say anything at all to you about leaving? I shook my head and looked away. I did not want her to see my fear. What about you, Suzella? Anything? Suzella tried desperately to think of something, but finally she too said there was nothing. The door to the boys' room opened and Christopher John and Little Man stepped out, blinking into the light. Morning, they said. Mama spoke to them, then quietly told them about Stacey. Gone? He questioned Christopher John, not understanding. Where? Out to the pasture with the cows? No, he's gone to find work. He's left home and we don't know where he is. Don't know? Exclaimed Little Man. What do you mean you don't know? Christopher John's eyes were round with fear, but he tried to comfort Mama. Oh, Mama, we find him. Stacey, he be round this place somewheres. Don't you worry now. Mama's eyes were soft on him, and for a moment I thought she was going to cry. But then, as if she were afraid to let her feelings out, her face grew suddenly stern, and the look of tears disappeared. Cassie, go get Mr. Morrison. Quick now. The rest of us better get dressed. We've got a lot of looking to do. I dashed out into the gray dawn across the lawn and through the garden. Mr. Morrison, I yelled as I ran. Mr. Morrison! Mr. Morrison's door opened and he stepped out, already dressed. Mr. Morrison! What is it, Cassie? I reached the porch and flung my arms around him. It's Stacey, Mr. Morrison. He's gone. Mama decided that the first person to whom she wanted to talk was Mo Turner. If anyone knew anything about Stacey's leaving, he would. Having begged to go with her, Christopher John, Little Man, and I climbed into the wagon, and the four of us headed toward Smelling's Creek, while Mr. Morrison, riding Lady, went up the road down toward Great Faith to see if families along the way knew anything that might help us. Big Ma and Suzella stayed behind to attend to the morning chores. Then they would go on to church to wait for the rest of us. At the Turners, Mo's father shook his head despondently. I's just about to come see you, Miss Logan. I've been searching around here all morning. Mo, he gone off too. Mama's lips parted slightly, and for a moment she seemed unable to speak. Then they're together. Most likely so. Mr. Turner glanced around at his other children, bewilderment and fear on their faces. That boy, he always talking about leaving, making money, always dreaming. I expect I got to the place I just ain't paid much attention. Seems it was all I could do just to get them crops in and feed these here young'uns. He wiped his eyes, beginning to tear, and swallowed. 'Spect I should 'a listened more. Sure should 'a. Brother Turner, do you have any idea where Mo could have gone? Mr. Turner bowed his head, then looked back sorrowfully at Mama. No, ma'am, Miss Logan. Ain't got no idea. No idea at all. Mr. Turner said that he would start checking around the Smellings Creek area for word about Stacey and Mo, and we climbed back into the wagon and headed for Soldiers Road, passing the Granger Road. We crossed to the Hopkins place where Mama questioned Clarence, but Clarence knew nothing. From Clarence's we went directly to Great Faith, where a crowd was waiting as we pulled onto the grounds. The services forgotten, everyone gathered around the wagon in frenzied excitement, offering advice and consolation as Mama and Mr. Morrison tried to decide what to do next. You talked to little Willie? Mama asked Mr. Morrison. He could know something. Yes'm, he sure did. Little Willie spoke up, pushing his way to the front of the crowd. But Miss Logan, Mo and Stacey, they ain't said a thing to me about this. You sure? I mean, maybe there's something they said a while back about going. Anything, little Willie. Little Willie thought a moment, and after a glance at the Shorters, shook his head. Miss Logan, tell you the truth, we all talk sometimes about going away getting a job. Once Mo said something or another about the cane fields, and that's about all. I say what we gotta do here, put in Mr. Lanier, is get ourselves out to every place around here, white folks' place too, and get to asking about them boys, see if anybody done seen 'em. I can't believe them young'uns done gone off alone, Miss Lanier lamented. Nothing but babies. Mr. Wiggins looked over at Mr. Lanier. We better split up then, 'cause we go all through here. That's a lot of folks to cover. Me and my family, we'll take the Harrison plantation, then head on down towards Smellings Creek. Good idea, said Reverend Gabson. Better take more than your family with you, though. Get another group and we go on up the road toward Strawberry. Another one go on back over to the Montier place and help out the Turners. Don't you worry now, sugar, Miss Wiggins said to Mama. We're going to have them boys back here for nightfall. Mama acknowledged her with a grateful smile. Well, if you all will check around here, then Mr. Morrison and I can check in Strawberry. Strawberry! Exclaimed Mrs. Leanne. Lord, child, you ain't thinking them young'uns done gone that far. I think, Mama said softly, that maybe they could have gone even farther than that. More plans for the search were made. Then before everyone departed, all heads bowed in prayer, and Reverend Gabson, for once keeping it short, beseeched God to lead us to Stacey and Mo. Everyone said amen, and the search began. Dusk settled, and still Stacey had not come home. People returned from their appointed search routes, read the emptiness of the faces around them, and stayed, crowding the rooms and talking in low voices, waiting for the good news which could send them home. The Turners arrived, but they had no news either, and by the time the wagon rolled into the yard with only Mama and Mr. Morrison in it, we all recognized that there was to be no good news. Not this night. Mary child, y'all ain't found nothing? Big Ma said. Nothing at all, questioned Mr. Turner. Weary and discouraged, Mama looked out at all the people waiting to hear. She put an arm around little man. There were men recruiting for the cane fields yesterday in Strawberry. Truck left out of there this first thing this morning. We think maybe Stacey and Mo were on it. Lordy, cried Mr. Tomby. Them young'uns gone to the cane fields? Then they be lucky to get back here at all. Hush your mouth, Tomby, ordered Miss Leanne. You won't upset these young'uns more than they ought to is. I felt the day's fear slipping into a new terror. Mama, what are we going to do now? She turned to look at me. I sent a telegram to your papa, she said. When he gets here, he'll know. In the middle of the night, I heard little man and Christopher John sobbing loudly, and Mama trying to comfort them. I lay very still on my pallet, my eyes dry. I refused to cry. Crying would be like admitting Stacey was really gone, and he couldn't be gone. Not far. Not for long. He just couldn't. When Papa came, he held Mama to him, then the rest of us, before shaking Mr. Morrison's hand and greeting Susella. Looking tired from his long journey, he settled down to read the note and listen to all that we knew about Stacey's leaving. "Most likely, if he work in Kane," said Mr. Morrison. "He in Louisiana somewheres." Papa nodded. "But the thing is, we can't be sure. They got cane here. Some of these other states, too. But Louisiana, they's the ones that got them big cane plantations," Mr. Morrison contended. "That's where they be needing the most choppers." "You say nobody could tell you where that truck was headed?" "From what we could gather," Mama said, looking exhausted from so little sleep, "the cane people never really said. Just said the pay was $8 a week, and for anyone who wanted to be in front of the mercantile, for anyone who wanted the work, to be in front of the mercantile on Sunday morning or at the Wallace store. Evidently the truck came right down through here." Papa ran the flat of his hand over his head and was very quiet. When he spoke again, he said, "I called Hammer. Soon's he gets here, we'll go looking. Take the main road out of here and ask along the way if folks know anything about transport trucks to the cane plantations." "You know," Mr. Morrison said, "I should have seen it coming. Him so worried about the crops and all." "Don't you go blaming yourself now. It surely ain't your fault." Mr. Morrison nodded. "That boy? You know he mean an awful lot to me, too." "I know," Papa said. "You gonna bring Stacey back, ain't you, Papa?" said a confident Christopher John. "Ain't you?" "I'm gonna try, son. I'm gonna try." Uncle Hammer arrived that same evening, and without taking time to rest, he and Papa climbed into the Ford and left again. We watched as the car sped away, the autumn sunset casting a pale glow upon it. We watched and waited. "Cassie, where are you going?" I didn't answer Christopher John as I plunged into the forest. "Wait up, Cassie," he hollered, following with Little Man. I ran faster, past the gray-barked sweet gums and the wintry smelling pines, past the stately black oaks and the nut-laden hickories. Near the pond I stopped and flung my arms around a massive pine, needing its comfort. I felt the rough of its bark against my skin, and I wanted to wail out my sorrow to it, but hearing Christopher John and Little Man, I tore away from the tree and ran on. By the time Christopher John and Little Man reached me, I was sitting on the bank of the pond. They looked at me in silence and collapsed beside me. For a while we were all quiet. Then Little Man said, "Why'd he go, huh? That's what I want to know." He took a pebble and threw it angrily into the pond. "How come Stacey just gone off like he done, and ain't even said goodbye nothing? He got tired of being with us or what? Huh? Don't he care?" I felt the same anger, but feeling it my duty as the eldest now to try and comfort him, I said, "He cares. He just thought he was doing what he had to do, I guess." "Sure he did," confirmed Christopher John. "Stacey, he probably figured he had to go, that it was the best thing." "Well, why didn't he take us with him then?" "Boy, he probably had a hard enough time just to get out of here himself," I explained irritably. "How you expect him to be worrying about you two?" Little Man looked away hurt. "I wouldn't have been no trouble." I felt his pain. "I know." We heard someone coming from the east and looked out over the pond, waiting. After several moments, Jeremy Sims appeared. He waved, and then he reached the pond, settled beside us. He had heard about Stacey. "He'll be back, you know. He'll be all right, too. He caught the misgiving in our eyes and chastised us gently for our poor faith. "Y'all ain't give up, have you? Why, Stacey, he gone all the way to Louisiana by hisself over 2 years ago now, and he was a lot younger then. Y'all forgotten that?" It took us a moment, but we finally said we hadn't. "Then don't," he ordered, leaning back on his elbows. "Stacey, he can take care of himself all right." With Jeremy, we did not have to talk when we had no more words to say. And now as he grew quiet, we grew quiet as well. Around us, the world of green trees reaching toward blue skies sang a sad song in the soft breeze, sharing our loneliness. Forgotten for the moment was the work waiting for us. As tree boughs fanned above us and birds silhouetted like dark messengers against the sky called out to invite us to go with them. I thought of the everyday times Stacey had sat here with us watching the same trees and the same sky, and the birds flew away taking their messages with them. I wondered if he ever would again. A week after Stacey left, school started, and for the first time we walked the red road without him. Suzella had received a letter from Cousin Bud saying that she would have to stay a while longer, and she enrolled the first day at Great Faith as a 10th grader. But by the end of the day, it had become painfully clear to her teacher that Suzella's educational level was much too advanced for the class, and she was skipped to the 11th, 12th grade class under the instruction of Mr. Wellever himself. In addition to her promotion, Suzella had her New York lessons to keep up with, and she juggled her study time between lessons from Great Faith and lessons sent from St. Anne's, which Mama helped her with. Being in the 6th grade this year, I found myself in Mrs. Mabel Thompson's class. Miss Thompson seemed satisfactory enough. I felt nothing for her one way or the other. Little man was fortunate enough to have Miss Rosella Sayers, a young teacher from Jackson. But poor Christopher John, now in the 4th grade, had fallen into the hands of Miss Daisy Crocker. I greatly sympathized with him, but, as in everything else, Christopher John tried to see the bright side in having to face such a shrew each morning. "Maybe she done changed," he said hopefully on the first day of school. However, when classes were over, he was noticeably quiet. "Well?" I asked him. He shrugged dejectedly and admitted, "She's still the same." No doubt she was. Certainly little else seemed to be. Without Stacey, nothing much was the same. The days passed, with each day growing longer than the day before. Every day little man and Christopher John stared out the window watching the road, waiting for Stacey, who never came. Every day on the way to school we listened anxiously for any sound on the road, a car, a wagon, footsteps, that might bring news of him. In the mornings I awoke with the dread of Stacey's absence hanging in the air, and throughout each day I was consumed with the hope of seeing him walking in that loping gait of his past the old oak and the cotton fields and up the drive. But then each night I went to bed feeling helpless once again, and angry. Angry at the cane people for coming to Strawberry waving their $8 offer under the noses of needy boys, and angry at Stacey for leaving us. Through 1 week we waited, then 2. In the middle of the 3rd week, Pop and Uncle Hammer returned. Stacey wasn't with them. "How many places you go to?" Mama questioned as we sat at the kitchen table. "Wasn't there anyone who could tell you something?" Papa put down his coffee. Unshaven, eyes bloodshot, both he and Uncle Hammer looked exhausted. "Seems there's men that just make a business of getting workers for the cane fields. They ain't hired by the plantation owners. They just get the workers, bring 'em to the plantations, get their money, and go on. Usually most of 'em don't take boys young as Stacey and Mo." "Well, you talked to some of them, didn't you?" There was an unexpected harshness to Mama's voice, and Papa noticed it as we all did. Some. But ones we did talk to claimed they wouldn't have known if they'd cared Stacey or not, since they don't keep any lists. Then, too, they said that just about anybody with a truck for hire could take up the business of trucking people to the fields. It'd be near impossible to find them all. Besides that, added Uncle Hammer, sometimes they keep the workers moving, taking them from plantation to plantation, chopping cane. Whoop. Mama accepted this in silence. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, then she looked at Papa. When are you going out again? Uncle Hammer glanced over at Papa. Papa met the glance, then put his hand over Mama's. Honey, you got any idea how many people grow cane? You saying it matters how many? It's going to have to matter. Well, I don't care how many there are. I want Stacey back in this house. Mary. When, David? Right now. I don't see much point. Much point? Your son is out there somewhere. Don't you think I know that? But we don't know where to look. I figure we may do better just to wait for some word from Stacey. Leastways, we'll know by the postmark about where he is. Mama pulled away from him. You don't want to go looking for him? I will. Mary, use some sense. He's been gone too long, David, and I'm not going to rest till he's back in this house. A look of accusation was in Mama's eyes. Saying nothing else, she arose abruptly and left the room. Big Ma patted Papa's arm. You gonna have to be patient with her, son. It's hard on her. She think it ain't hard on me. She'll be all right. I'll go talk to her. Then Big Ma, too, got up. Papa watched her leave, shook his head, and sighed. It was late when I heard their voices. Unable to sleep, I had left my pallet and sat in a chair by the open window. As I stared out into the blackness, listening to the sounds of the crickets and the katydids, I heard the door to Mama and Papa's room open and close, and shortly afterward, the opening and closing of the door to the boys' room. Thought I heard you out here, Uncle Hammer said in a low voice. Couldn't sleep. Me neither. There was a silence, then Uncle Hammer said, David, I'm gonna leave my car here. What? Gonna leave my car. That way you find out anything, you can go see about it. Man, what I'm gonna hear? I tell you, Hammer, I don't know how much to fault myself, and how much to fault Stacey, and how much to fault the times. But I'll tell you something else. Much as I love Stacey and want him home, I can't help feeling sometimes like he was old enough to go off by himself. He's old enough to get back here by himself. Maybe that's just how it'll have to be. He ought to know we was gonna worry. When I get real angry sometimes at that boy. And I know I oughtn't. And why oughtn't you? He went off, ain't told you where, ain't sent no word. Now that's what really got me worried. Maybe he can't send no word. Papa's voice trailed off, and in its place came a sound I had not expected to hear. It was a strange, muffled sound, one I knew, but had never heard from Papa. I trembled, frightened, for Papa, who was always so strong, was crying. Suddenly the crickets and the katydids seemed louder, and the pounding of my heart louder than both. Uncle Hammer said nothing. Finally Papa cleared his throat and was silent. After a long while he spoke once more. Lord Hammer, I wish I knew where he was. I can stay, and we can go searching again. What about your job? It don't matter. No, I still feel the same way. It's better to wait and try to get some information first before I start running around out there, not knowing where I'm going. I figure to ask some questions, find out more about them plantations. There was a break in his words, and when he spoke again I could hardly hear him. I tell myself he's near 15, and that a lot of boys have to make it on their own time they're his age. Then I think about all he don't know yet, and I get scared. Real scared. David, I expect you got a right to be scared, but you gotta remember, you and Mary, y'all taught Stacey good. He's smart, and he's got good sense. I figure he'll be all right. Besides, maybe he just had to learn on his own what this life business is all about. Had hoped he wouldn't have to this soon. Well, that was his choice. Perhaps, but maybe he wouldn't have made it. I'd have been here for him to talk to. Mary blames me, about him leaving, and I can't blame her either. She told me over and over not to go away. Mary's upset. I know, but if I'd have stayed... Look here, David, don't you go faulting yourself, and don't let Mary wear at you. You two, y'all got something special here, and Stacey going out not spoil that. There's still Cassie, Christopher John, and little man to think about. Now, I ain't much good at talking about stuff like this, seeing I ain't never even had a wife. But I know y'all got too much to go laying blame. What I heard Mary say this afternoon wasn't coming from Mary. That was coming from a woman all tore apart with worry and fear. You listen to me, David, and get this here thing straightened out between y'all. You hear me now? I hear. And David, you need me come go looking again, you just call. Remember that. I'll remember. At breakfast the next morning, Papa looked tired, as if he had not slept at all. He and Mama said nothing to each other during the entire meal. When breakfast was over, and I had finished the dishes, I sat absently swinging on the front porch, thinking of the silence between them. As I stared out at the fields, soggy with the day's continuing drizzle, Christopher John and little man rounded the house from the drive and joined me. "What you doing?" little man asked, disrupting the rhythm of the swing as he and Christopher John sat down. "What it look like I'm doing?" Little man chose not to comment on this. "Papa and Mama, they was fighting in the barn." Little man chose not to comment on this. "Oh, they wasn't either fighting," objected Christopher John. "They was discussing." "Well, it seemed like fighting to me." I looked at little man. "What they fighting about?" "Well, me and Christopher John was down by the smokehouse, and we heard 'em. Mama, she said if Papa didn't go back to look for Stacey, then she was going to go on her own self. But Papa, he said that was crazy. Wasn't no way she was going to find Stacey less'n she went to nearly every cane field in the South. Then Mama said if Papa hadn't have gone back to the railroad, Stacey, he wouldn't have left looking for no job." "She said that?" "She didn't mean it, though," continued Christopher John. "She just upset, that's all. When she seen us and we here, she looked real sorry." "What'd she say?" "Told us to come back to the house." I sighed and looked out at the forest. "I don't like it when Mama and Papa fight that way," said little man. Christopher John turned on him irritably. "How many times I got to tell you they wasn't fighting?" Little man allowed the question to hang a moment in the misty air before repeating, "Well, sure seemed like fighting to me." "Ah, there y'all are." Papa came across the stepping stones from the drive and climbed the steps. "I was wondering where y'all'd gotten off to." He leaned against a post, and immediately Christopher John hopped up. "Papa, you want to sit down?" "No, thank you, son. This here post's fine enough." As if to show it was fine enough for him too, Christopher John took up a similar position at the post, opposite Papa. "Papa," I said, "you really ain't going back to look for Stacey?" "Baby, if I had any idea where Stacey was, I'd go get him this very minute. But I ain't got no idea at all, excepting he's working the cane fields somewhere. Now, much as I hate it, we may just have to wait till we hear from him. And seems to me, him knowing we'll be worried, he ought to be writing soon." None of us spoke, and he said, "You think I don't know how y'all feel?" We looked at him without answering. "Got a great big empty spot that aches all the time, and can't nothing fill it except for Stacey to come home." "Well, I know it. 'cause I got it myself. We all got it. We all part of one body in this family, and with Stacey gone, we just ain't whole. I know that, but till he do come back, we just gonna have to keep on being strong. And we gonna have to support each other and stick together in this thing, 'cause we all going through the same hurt and worry. But Papa, I said, what if we don't hear from Stacey? Papa hesitated as if he did not want to answer my question. Just gonna have to have faith, Cassie. That's all. That's all I can say. Faith, Stacey's all right, and faith he's gonna come home. Lord willing, that's the way it'll be. Now it's gonna be hard living without him till he do come back, but we just gonna have to try. Gonna have to try hard. I had never heard Papa sound so tired. Papa, don't you think you ought to get some sleep? You said you didn't sleep so good last night. I will, Cassie girl, I will. But he didn't move from the porch. He stood there for some time sharing the aching pain of loneliness with us. And when he finally did go, it was not into the house, but across the lawn to the road, where he went into the forest alone. That night, I cried. And that's the end of chapter 10. So, until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and grant you his peace.